Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking on an ambitious mission to decode the ultimate biological machine, the cell.
Right.
We're going deep into the foundational anatomical structures that govern all human life. Our goal isn't just to list terms, but to give you a dynamic mental blueprint.
Exactly. We want to turn these dense textbook structures into, stories that explain why one tiny defect can cause massive systemic diseases.
That's the key, isn't it?
It really is. When you look at the source material, the cell is this dynamic, incredibly organized microcity,
And its size is a major factor.
a huge constraint. It's typically limited to, say, 5 to 50 micrometers because of the physics of diffusion. So our plan is to move methodically from the outside in.
Let's do it. So we start at the city limits,
Right.
plasma membrane. This is the border patrol, defining what's in and what's out.
Precisely. And if you could actually see it with an electron microscope, it has this very specific look, the unit membrane profile.
Which looks like what exactly?
You'd see two dark, dense lines separated by a clear, translucent gap. The whole thing is incredibly thin, maybe 15 nanometers total.
And what gives it that layered look?
That's its chemistry. It's a mix of lipids, phospholipids, and cholesterol and proteins. The lipids form this critical bilayer.
Right, with the water-hating tails pointing inward.
Exactly. The hydrophobic tails face each other, creating that insulating core, while the hydrophilic heads face the water on both sides. It's this fluid structure that lets proteins float around like buoys, acting as gates and signals.
And then there's that fuzzy coating on the outside, the glycocalyx, right?
Or glycocalyx or cell coat.
Right.
It's this fuzzy, carbohydrate-rich layer that projects outward. Think of it as the cell's identity badge.
It's passport.
Perfect analogy. Its glycoproteins and glycolipids contain the cell-specific antigens. It's how your immune system knows self from foreign, which is why it's so critical in organ transplants.
Amazing. Okay, so logistics, how do things get across this very selective border?
Well, the easiest route is passive diffusion. Small, nonpolar molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide, or lipid-soluble things like steroid hormones, they're the VIPs. They just dissolve right through.
No energy needed. But what about everything else, like sugars and ions? They can't just pass through.
No, they need help. That's facilitated diffusion. Still no energy required because they're moving down their concentration gradient, but they need a protein to help them.
And there are two types of help.
Two main types. You have carrier proteins, which are like revolving doors that bind to specific things like glucose. And then you have channel proteins, which are more like open gates, mostly for ions. They're much faster.
But those gates aren't just open all the time, are they?
No, they are tightly regulated. Some are ligand-gated, meaning they only open when a specific molecule binds to them. Others are voltage-gated. They open and close based on electrical changes across the membrane.
Which is essential for nerves and muscles.
Absolutely.
Okay, but what if the cell needs to push something uphill against the flow? That's where the real work comes in.
That's active transport. And it always costs energy, usually ATP. We have a few types of these transporters. First are the symporters or co-transporters. They move two different molecules at the same time, in the same direction.
Like the glucose-sodium cotransporter.
A classic example. Very efficient.
And then there's the most famous energy hog in the cell, the antiporter.
The sodium-potassium
Okay,
pump.
got
It's the iconic antiporter. It moves two different molecules in opposite directions. It's constantly pumping 3 sodium ions out for every 2 potassium ions it pulls in.
And that maintains the electrochemical gradient for, well, pretty much everything.
It's the energy backbone of the cell, truly.
So we've successfully crossed the membrane. We are now inside the inner city, the cytoplasm.
Right, and the cytoplasm is everything inside the membrane but outside the nucleus. It's the gel-like cytosol, all the organelles, and even non-membrane inclusions like stored glycogen or pigments.
Like lipofuscin.
The wear and tear pigment, yes.
Yeah.
It builds up in cells that don't divide as they get older.
Let's get to the central manufacturing plant, the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER.
The ER is this vast, interconnected network of membrane channels and tubules that's actually continuous with the nuclear membrane. And we split it into two types.
The rough ER is easy to spot. It looks rough because it's covered in ribosomes.
Precisely. The RER is all about synthesizing and folding proteins, but specifically the ones that are going to be secreted, put into membranes, or sent to other organelles.
And its cousin, the smooth ER.
The SER is, well, it's clean. No ribosomes. Its job is all about lipids. It synthesizes lipids and steroids. It detoxifies drugs with enzymes like cytochrome P450. And in muscle, it's the sarcoplasmic reticulum.
The calcium storage tank.
The dedicated calcium storage and release system, yeah.
Okay, so proteins get built and folded in the RER, Then they head to the cell's post office for final processing, the Golgi apparatus.
The Golgi is a stack of flattened sacs, usually near the nucleus. It's very directional. Vesicles from the ER arrive at the cis-face, the entry point.
And then they move through the stacks.
Exactly, getting chemically tagged and modified along the way. Then they exit at the transphase.
Where the trans-Golgi network, the TGN, makes the final call.
That's its job, sorting. The TGN packages the finished products into vesicles and sends them on their way, either out of the cell or to the cell's own recycling and waste management system.
The lysosomes, the biohazard cleanup crew?
A perfect description. They're membrane-bound spheres packed with over 60 different acid hydrolases, powerful enzymes that can break down just about anything.
And they're only active when they need to be.
Right. A primary lysosome is dormant. It only becomes an active secondary lysosome when it fuses with something the cell has taken in.
And the clinical link here is really stark.
It is. If just one of those 60-plus enzymes is faulty, you get a lysosomal storage disorder. In Tay-Sachs disease, for instance, a lipid accumulates in nerve cells because the enzyme to break it down is missing.
And that accumulation is what destroys the neurons.
It swells and destroys them. It just shows how one tiny failure can have devastating consequences.
From recycling to power generation, the powerhouse itself, the mitochondrion.
Instantly recognizable. Elliptical bodies with a defining double membrane system. The inner membrane is the key. It's folded inward dramatically to form these shelves called cristae.
And all those folds are for what?
Surface area. Just to maximize the space for all the ATP synthase molecules needed for oxidative phosphorylation. That's where most of the cell's ATP comes from.
And inside in the matrix, they have their own DNA.
Their own circular mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, which is fascinating because it strongly supports the endosymbiotic theory that they were once free-living bacteria.
And because that DNA is only inherited from the mother?
It has led to new clinical approaches like mitochondrial replacement therapies to prevent passing on severe mitochondrial diseases.
Okay, last one for this section. The specialized detox squad, the peroxisomes.
Peroxisomes handle the really harsh chemical reactions. They perform beta-oxidation on very long-chain fatty acids that are too big for the mitochondria.
And in the process, they create hydrogen peroxide.
Which is toxic, but they contain the enzyme catalyst to immediately neutralize it. It's a self-contained chemical safety unit.
Incredible. Okay, let's move to the infrastructure that supports all this. The cytoskeleton.
The cell's structural engineering and its logistics hub, all in one. It has three main types of filaments. The thinnest are the actin filaments.
I saw a term in the notes here that sounds fascinating, treadmilling.
It is. It's the essence of how they move. Actin filaments have a plus end that grows and a minus end that shrinks. Treadmilling is that constant cycle of building on one end while shrinking on the other.
So the filament itself is moving.
It allows the cell to change shape and move, yes.
Yeah.
It's the core of microvilli, and it powers cell migration through things called lamellipodia and filopodia.
Okay, next up, the microtubules, the big highways.
Hollow cylinders, the largest of the filaments.
Yeah.
They're built from tubulin and they're highly polarized. They exhibit what's called dynamic instability. They can grow and shrink incredibly fast.
Building and tearing down tracks as needed.
Exactly, and they usually grow out from a central point, the centrosome.
And cargo moves along these highways with motor proteins that literally walk.
It's astonishing. You have kinesins, which walk toward the plus end, moving cargo away from the cell center. Think of them delivering neurotransmitters down an axon.
Anterograde transport.
Right. And then you have dyneins, which walk toward the minus end, carrying materials back to the cell body for recycling. That's retrograde transport.
And this microtubule architecture is also key for things like cilia.
Yes. Motile cilia and flagella are built on this classic 9+2 arrangement of microtubules, the axoneme. It's the dynein arms linking these microtubules that generate the bending motion.
And if those arms don't work,
You get conditions like Cardiganer syndrome, immotile cilia, which leads to chronic respiratory infections, infertility, and often a mirror image organ arrangement called cetus inversus.
And this is totally different from microvilli.
Completely. Microvilli are static, actin-supported fingers. Their only job is to maximize surface area for absorption, like in the gut.
Last part of the skeleton, the intermediate filaments, the cell's rebar.
Built for pure tensile strength. They're like durable rope. And they're tissue-specific. You find keratins in skin cells defects cause blistering diseases.
Yeah.
And you find lamins forming a mesh right under the nuclear envelope.
Which brings us right to the city's control room, the nucleus.
Home of the genome. It's enclosed by a double membrane that's continuous with the ER, and that envelope is studded with these incredibly sophisticated gateways.
Nuclear pore complexes.
Right. And they're not just holes. They are highly selective filters, controlling exactly what gets in and what gets out.
So how does all that DNA fit inside?
Through intent organization, the DNA is wrapped around histone proteins to form nucleosomes.
The beads on a string.
The beads on a string, yeah, and then those coil up further and further.
And we can actually see which parts of the DNA are active just by looking.
You can. The light, loosely packed stuff is chromatin. That's transcriptionally active. The dark, dense stuff is heterochromatin. That's inactive. A great example is the Barr body, the inactivated X chromosome in female cells.
When all this DNA condenses, we see the 46 chromosomes. And their ends, the telomeres, are critically important.
Telomeres are protective caps of repeating DNA sequences. In most of our cells, they get shorter every time the cell divides.
And when they get too short,
The cell enters replicative senescence. It stops dividing. It's a powerful anti-cancer mechanism, but it's also a major contributor to aging.
let's talk about division. First, mitosis. Simple duplication.
Mitosis gives you two genetically identical diploid daughter cells. It's the straightforward process of copying, regulated by proteins called cyclins and CDAs. The key event is the separation of sister chromatids in anaphase.
And we can spot errors here, like the Philadelphia chromosome.
Yeah, exactly. Karyotyping can reveal that translocation between chromosomes 9 and 22, which is the hallmark of chronic myeloid leukemia.
Now, compare that to the process that creates variation, meiosis.
Meiosis is completely different.
Right.
Two divisions to produce haploid gametes. The critical magical event is in prophase I, where homologous chromosomes pair up and exchange genetic material, crossing over. It's the fundamental source of genetic variation in a species.
And when meiosis goes wrong,
Errors in separation or non-disjunction lead to aneuploidy, an abnormal number of chromosomes. The most common is Down syndrome, trisomy 21, and we know the risk of that increases with maternal age.
okay, let's pivot to how cells work together, how they connect to their neighbors.
In tissues like epithelia, cells are highly polarized. They have an apical top and a basolateral bottom, separated by a junctional complex.
The glue and the seal. Let's break down the junction types. First, the sealers.
Those are the tight junctions, or zonulea occludentes. They form a continuous belt that completely blocks the space between cells, controlling what can leak through.
Next, the anchors.
Two kinds here. The zonula adherens links to the cell's internal actin skeleton. But for real mechanical strength, you have the desmosomes. They're like spot welds that anchor to the strong intermediate filaments. That's what gives your skin its resilience.
And finally, the communicators.
The gap junctions. They're clusters of channels called connexins that directly connect two cells, allowing ions and small molecules to pass right through. Essential for coordination, like in heart muscle.
To wrap up, a cell's life eventually ends. We mentioned senescence, the growth arrest.
Which is a powerful way to stop cancer from developing.
But then there's controlled demolition, apoptosis.
Programmed cell death. The cell shrinks and breaks into neat little packages, apoptotic bodies, that get cleaned up without causing inflammation. It's a clean, controlled process run by a cascade of enzymes called casposes.
And the cell has multiple cleanup systems running all the time.
Three main crews. Autophagy handles bulk cargo like entire organelles. The ubiquitin proteasome system tags and destroys individual bad proteins.
And a special system just for the power plants.
Mitophagy. It selectively targets and degrades damaged mitochondria. If that system fails, as it can in Parkinson's disease, those damaged mitochondria build up and cause problems.
We have journeyed through an absolutely astonishing microscopic city. Its borders, factories, power grid, skeleton, control center, and demolition crews.
And the takeaway for you is that the cell is the absolute bedrock of human pathology. Every clinical problem, from cancer to neurodegeneration, is rooted in a defect in one of these fundamental structures.
As you move through the rest of your day, just consider the sheer volume and precision of this internal transport. Think about those motor proteins, kinesins and dyneins, navigating the microtubule network inside a neuron that could be a meter long.
The distances are immense at that scale.
They are, and they have to do it with perfect accuracy, billions of times every second, just to keep you running. Challenge yourself to contemplate the efficiency of that molecular railway system inside you. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the basic anatomical foundation of life.